I'm Jacob Courtwright, and this is The Locker Room.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome into Saturday Morning Pick'ems with the boys. And today is Championship Saturday. Once again, I'm glad to have Justin and Seth joining me today for their picks, and then we are going to talk a little bit about our college football playoffs. How's it going to be locked? What our predictions are, and what craziness might ensue with this college football playoff. With so many different opportunities for several different teams, this is the craziest, by far the craziest playoffs that going into the last day that I think we have seen since the whole playoff format has started. Now, we can all agree that this is the year that college should have added more teams to the playoffs, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But first, let's get to some of the championship games, and we are going to start right here with the Oregon Ducks. Last night, they played late. This video comes out Saturday morning, so we didn't get that game in. But, of course, the Oregon Ducks are now Pac-12 champions back-to-back years. Gentlemen, I know you watched it. So, Seth, I'm going to start with you. I just kind of want your little sum up and thoughts on the football game and what you think about Oregon moving forward. And then, Justin, we'll go to you. So, Seth, go ahead.
Yeah, Oregon showed what they had on defense, I think, and they had some crucial turnovers, which really locked up the game. Without those, I think USC wins. So Oregon's defense won them that game.
Yeah. Justin?
Yeah, Oregon definitely played amazing on defense last night, getting 3 interceptions, forcing a fumble. So they played really well last night, and ultimately that was the difference in the ball game, especially towards the end, getting that interception, wasting the clock down, and then of course sacking USC's quarterback at the end of the game. That was big for them, and so Oregon's defense came out and showed out, and that's the reason they won that ball game. I feel pretty good about them going on next year. They should have a lot of players coming back. Most players were really young that play for them, so they should have a lot of players coming back. Also, that coach, I really like the coach, and he's going to be there for the foreseeable future as well.
Yeah, a couple of quick things. Of course, if you can't see my screen or if you're just listening to this, I know a lot of people just listen to it. I'm all decked out in Oregon today. Of course, I'm a huge Oregon fan. But the one thing I always pride myself on is looking at my teams objectively. And all year, Oregon's defense has struggled to really get into a rhythm. Now, that does take a huge hit when you have 3 of your starting defensive backs and starting safeties. One of those won the Defensive Player of the Year in the Rose Bowl last year. All of them opt out of the season. So now you have 2 true freshmen starting at your defensive back position. You have 2 true freshmen starting at your linebacker positions. And then you have 2 defensive linemen that are in the rotation that are true freshmen. So Oregon is extremely young. You have a lot of 18-year-old kids that were being thrown into their first ever college situations right off the bat. They didn't get OTAs. They didn't get a lot of practices. So going into this year, I figured defense was going to be a struggle for the Ducks, and it was. The irony for the Oregon Ducks, though, was going into last night, our defense was horrible at getting the ball turned over, and we were bad at the run. And what did we do good at? 3 interceptions, 2 of them from the same guy, and we stopped the run of USC, which really made their offense stale throughout the entire course of the game. So the irony going into it was our defense wasn't good, we couldn't get turnovers, and that is exactly what won us the football game last night. Now, going forward, we have a quarterback in Tyler Shough that I am not completely have full faith in. He was the number 3rd ranked quarterback coming out of high school last year. I'm not sold on this kid. I don't know if it was the lack of practices and the lack of reps on offense that he just seemed out of sync from about the 3rd game on. Started off the year very hot, looked very promising. Most people even said could be a Heisman candidate. So I'm interested to see where this goes with Tyler Shough. Last night we saw no CJ Verdell. He's preparing for the NFL, and most of us know he was one of the top 5 running backs in all of college football. But we brought in a rookie, a true freshman, I guess I should say, at 18 years old, who just seemed to pick it up right where CJ left off. So I am very excited to see Oregon. 5 new starting linemen this year, most of them true freshmen. And the biggest thing, like Justin mentioned, Mario Cristobal signs a deal till 2026. Why this is so huge, Mario Cristobal has brought recruiting to Oregon. Here's how he did it. He worked under arguably the greatest college coach. I would say the greatest college coach in Nick Saban. What he's done for the University of Alabama, not only in recruiting, but of course championships, we all can agree is he's just incredible. He worked under him. He was a student under him. Apparently maintains a very good relationship with Nick Saban still. And it looks like that is what Oregon is starting to build. I'm not going to say, we're the Alabama of the Pac-12 because, the Alabama's been a long journey to what they are. But he has now made us the number 2 recruiting class in all of football for 2021. And if you're an Oregon fan or if you've known a little bit about Oregon, that is not who we are. That is not what we have done. Seth, back in the day how bad Oregon's recruiting has been under Chip Kelly. It was decent, but Helfrich, it was very bad. Willie Taggart was even worse. I mean, we literally were getting one top 4-star guy or one 5-star guy a year. We now have 5 signed on for next year. Penny Sewell, our stud freshman that started for us this year. Justin Flows, who, of course, redshirted and did not play this year that much. All these guys coming in. So I'm very excited for the recruiting aspect of Oregon. Very excited for our future. And we'll move on because I don't want to harp. I could talk about Oregon all day, but those are my thoughts on the game. I'm excited for the future. Quarterback position is going to be what is going to be the determining factor for this offense. We have a true freshman who was the number 2 quarterback in all of high school last year. He's a redshirt freshman this year. So will we see him next year? That is going to be the big question. Let's go on to probably the most intriguing game of the day for me. Number 14 Northwestern versus number 4 Ohio State. Now, here's the deal. Ohio State has struggled on defense. Their numbers are down across the board. And, of course, I'm getting my ESPN updates before the game start. But their numbers have been down across the board on the defensive side of the football, not creating a lot of turnovers, not getting a lot of quarterback pressures this year. Their linebackers giving up almost 4 yards on the ground. I guess their whole defense, I should say. So this Northwestern team can move the football, and Ohio State struggles to stop it sometimes. Of course, we know Ohio State's offense is nuclear with Justin Fields at that quarterback position. So this is going to be perhaps my most intriguing game of the day besides the Bama-Florida game. So, Justin, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on this game, and what do you think the outcome might be?
Ohio State's been struggling a lot lately this season. They had some up and downs, but they've also had some really good moments as well, where Justin Fields has just been incredible. He's looked like the number 2 quarterback that's going to go in this draft, and they've just looked like a powerhouse. I think with playing 6 few games, and Northwestern played a few more games than them. Northwestern has beaten more quality teams than they have for sure. Definitely. Ohio State hasn't beaten the teams that Northwestern has had to beat. And Northwestern is a great team on defense. They play sound on defense. They have really good linebackers and young linebackers. Those guys are studs back there. And so ultimately it's going to come down to the linebackers for Northwestern versus the running game of Ohio State. If Ohio State can run the ball, I foresee it's going to be a blowout. Ohio State's going to kill them because then Ohio State's going to be able to run, no problem. If they can't run the ball, that's where Ohio State's going to have an issue, and they're going to be one-dimensional and have to just keep throwing the ball. So my prediction is they're not going to have success running the ball, and I foresee this being a very close game, 28-23 Northwestern.
Wow. Very, very, this is, I think, the smartest you've been when it comes to the point spread. Usually you're somewhere within 3 and 4 touchdowns. But that's a very intriguing take. Seth, I'm going to go to you.
I just can't see this game being a close one. I think Ohio State, even though they're not as good as they have been in the past, I think they feel that they're a good team, and I feel that they've felt that they've been disrespected, and I think they'll show up against Northwestern and maybe make it a good game for the first quarter, maybe possibly the first half, but I think they pulled away at the end, couple touchdown spread, and really mess up this college football playoff bracket as far as potentially getting a 6-0 Ohio State team in there.
Well, this is definitely the biggest whoever wins this game, in my opinion, is going to the college football playoff all things considering what trickles down the rest of the day. And we'll talk about that in just a few moments. But I like Northwestern's chances to keep it a lot closer than most teams, and here's why. Like Justin mentioned, Northwestern is top 2 in their, not only in their conference against running quarterbacks. They did a very good job against Wisconsin. They've done a very good job against a lot of running quarterbacks this year, but they're number 1 in running offense as well. So they're very good on the defensive side of the football, stopping runs. My key for Ohio State was the exact same keys I had for them against Indiana. Can Sermon get it going on the ground? I think Sermon's the big key here, because against Indiana, Sermon had a very big first half, which opened things up. In the second half, Indiana sold out to stop the run. We saw Justin Fields have a couple turnovers. Next thing we know, Ohio State only won by 1 score. So I think this is going to be a very close game. I think it's going to be very interesting. There's a lot of things that could swing back and forth. It's hard for me to pick against Ohio State. They're kind of like Alabama for me. When they're in a playoff game position or where they're in championship games, there's very few times that good teams like Ohio State and Bama's and teams like that are going to lose those games. So for that reason, I'm going to go Ohio State 34. I'm going to go Northwestern 24. I think it's a very close game, and it could go either way depending on how Northwestern's defense shows up. But at the end of the day, I put my trust a little bit more in Justin Fields, and that is why I'm going to go Ohio State here. Moving on, number 10, Oklahoma versus number 6, Iowa State. Now, Oklahoma all year has not been talked about, has not been praised. After they dropped those 2 early ones, most people thought that we would not see Oklahoma in a championship game. But due to all the faults that happened in that conference, it just seems like every good team, Texas, all the good teams in that conference fall by the wayside, and Oklahoma is inevitably going to end up in that championship game. Seth, I'm going to go to you first. Oklahoma versus Iowa State. Who do you got? Is it a close one? And is there going to be a new champion in that division, or will Oklahoma remain up top?
Nope, it's going to be Oklahoma. Not a new champion this year. Oklahoma, I think, will win the game. And it's kind of like this last game we just talked about. I think it'll be close for a couple of quarters, but then I think Oklahoma might make it a score game. So I think Oklahoma, they win. I think they started clicking more towards the end of the year than they were at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And I think they're gonna win. That's my pick.
Dustin?
2 out of the last 3 years, Oklahoma has won their conference championship. And Iowa State this year has the best in their school history, the best points per game they've ever put up, the best yards per game they've put up, and this is their best record they have ever had in their school program. But I have to go with experience on this one. Oklahoma won their conference championship last year, of course. And it's not gonna stop. When Jalen Hurts left, you knew they were gonna load back up. And Iowa State's had a great year so far, but Spencer Rattler, he's been playing a lot better as the season went on. And of course, he's just a freshman, so he's gonna make those mistakes, but he's been playing a lot better lately. And I just can't pick against Oklahoma, and I can't foresee this being a close game either. I think Oklahoma has a little bit too much firepower, and then the experience is just going to come over, and it's going to end up being a 2-touchdown game. I'm going to go 42-24. It's going to be an 18-point game, and I just don't see anything else happening in that game. 42-24, Oklahoma.
All right. Well, I am picking against the grain. Here's what I like about Iowa State. I wanted to go Oklahoma. I always stick with Oklahoma. I usually go with the team that is the most consistent. But I've seen Spencer Rattler get rattled this year one too many times. Quite inconsistent. He turns over the football. The offensive line isn't that great. They don't have a consistent running game. I'm going Iowa State here on the same points that Justin makes when he talks about experience. Ohio State, Iowa State is one of the most experienced teams in all of college football, from the offensive line to the running backs, to the quarterbacks, to the wide receivers, to the defensive backs, to the linebackers. Iowa State is the most experienced team that we are going to talk about today, which is quite surprising when I read all this last night. I like Iowa State in this football game, and I think their defense is going to make one too many plays. This is a very close game, but I don't think that Oklahoma is the same Oklahoma that we have talked about in years past. I think Spencer Rattler is going to have this thing turn around next year, but this year I like Iowa State. They're in a good groove. They're the highest ranking that they've been. I just want to go with Iowa State here from everything that I've been researching, so I'm going to stick with my gut. I'm going to go 28-24, an incredible game, but Iowa State finally takes the reins of that conference. They deserve it. I'm pushing for you, Iowa State. Moving on, number 3, Clemson versus number 2, Notre Dame. Arguably the most interesting game because depending on the outcome, there could be 2 of these guys in the college football playoffs. So, Justin, I will start with you. If Clemson takes this game, not only are they a for sure lock in the playoffs, but is Notre Dame going to have a chance as well? Will we see Notre Dame finally prevail against Clemson? Is this Notre Dame team that good? I know we have seen them perform in a lot of games. This is going to be a major test as Trevor Lawrence plays quarterback today. So your thoughts on this game and the implications that could happen after it?
Well, look, the first game, Trevor Lawrence was out due to COVID. He didn't play at all. They were also missing 3 of their starting defensive linemen on that team, and they were also missing an offensive tackle that game. So they're missing a bunch of their key starters, of course, and then Trevor Lawrence being the most significant starter. But Notre Dame still came out to play and still won the game. So I can't fault them for winning. You got to play who you can play. You play who's ever in front of you. And you just try to win every week. And that's what Notre Dame's been trying to do. I really like how Ian Book's been playing. He's definitely been playing like a Heisman candidate for sure. Of course, he would not be my pick for the Heisman, but he's definitely playing at a Heisman level. He's definitely controlling that Notre Dame offense. He's making all the right reads. And then that defensive line and offensive line for Notre Dame, they are awesome players and great players to watch, and they really get after it. And that's ultimately what won them the first game versus Clemson. Is they were just able to dominate the line of scrimmage on both sides, offensively and defensively. Clemson had no answer for either side because Notre Dame just destroyed them on the offensive line of scrimmage and the defensive line of scrimmage. Now, with that, I don't think this is going to happen again. I think Clemson is going to beat Notre Dame, but I also think both teams will get in unless Notre Dame beats Clemson again, then Clemson's out. But I do believe my pick was I'm going to pick Clemson, and it's going to be a close one. I'm going to go 48-40 Clemson.
I agree. I think I'm going to go with Clemson on this one. I don't think it's going to be as close as 48-40, though. I don't even think Notre Dame's going to put up that many points on them. This is going to be a much different game than it was the first time around. Clemson's defense is rejuvenated and going to be ready to play, and now they got Trevor Lawrence back. That's going to make all the difference in the world. I think this is Clemson's ball game easy, and with that would make them both 10-1. I think both of them will probably make it into the playoffs.
Yeah, the interesting part about this game is we're going to see a completely different game that we saw played last time. Last time, Clemson did nothing but throw the ball all over the field. They struggled running it the entire day. Their defense was shaky. They couldn't stop the run. Notre Dame maintained time of possession, maintained yards on the ground. Their defense maintained third downs, holding Clemson to their lowest third down conversions in the last 2.5 years. So that being said, with Clemson finally being healthy, with Trevor Lawrence playing at his level, I mean, when we saw Trevor Lawrence return, most people thought we'd see some rust, and this man tossed for 4 touchdowns and over 350 yards. No doubt in my mind, Trevor Lawrence is the biggest difference in this football game. That being said, I think I'm going to go Clemson as well here. I just think Clemson's a little too overpowered for this Notre Dame squad. Now, the interesting thing about this, I think point spread is going to matter here. If Notre Dame loses by 25 or 30 points, Notre Dame might fall out of the college football conversation. And that is where we might have a team like an Ohio State who played a lot fewer games and a lot less competition sneak into this position here. But if Notre Dame can keep it close, if they can keep a loss to within 3 to 7 points, that's where I believe both teams make the college football playoff. If it looks good on paper, I think that's what's going to look good in the media's eyes. I would love to see a Clemson Notre Dame third game for all the marbles, or just see Notre Dame and Clemson both in the playoffs, because I think they both deserve to be there based on how they played this year. And we're going to talk about in just a few moments, like I said, about the college football playoffs. But I think not only strength of schedule, but amount of games matter this year as well. If you played 4 or 5 games, it's hard for me to want to put you into a college football playoff. Both teams are deserving. I think Clemson eats it out today. I think it's a little bit closer game, and that is why I think both teams might end up in the playoffs. But we'll talk about that in just a moment. Let's move on to Boise State versus San Jose State. Here's the deal. Not a lot of people are going to talk about this game, but we here at the Locker Room talk about championship games. Boise State has struggled. The last 2 games have struggled mightily on the defensive side of the football, allowing 300-plus yards in both those games. San Jose State is starting to get on a tear. Their offense looks good. Their defense looks good. I'm going San Jose State here in a pretty decent margin. I say San Jose State wins by at least 14 points. I don't like what I see from Boise State this year. Inconsistent quarterback play, inconsistent, especially on the defensive side. And if you give up 300-plus yards to a San Jose State offense, you're just going to see a complete blowout. So I'm going San Jose State here in a blowout. Seth, I'll go to you. What do you think about this game?
I'm going to go with the underdog on this one. I'm going to go Boise State.
Okay.
I think they're just maybe a more experienced team, a little scrappier. I think they're going to find a way to pull that one out.
Justin?
Boise State has won their conference championship 7 out of the last 8 years. That's pretty incredible that they've won that many. And I can't pick against Boise State. I don't care how good Hosanna State team is. Let's go Boise State.
Well, Hosanna State team is going down in Justin's mind. But San Jose State, I like them this year. I think I'm just going opposite. I'm going with the teams that I have some heart for. All right, I like the underdogs this year, and even though San Jose State is not the underdog, they definitely have not been conference champions in a very, very, very long time. I think only twice in school history. So I want to go underdog here. Now let's go to another underdog game. Number 23, Tulsa versus number 9, Cincinnati. Now I know a lot of people instantly want to go Cincinnati landslide. Tulsa has shaken a lot of heads this year. Their offense and defense is really in the top 25 of college football, and that is why they deserve a top 23. They're in number 23 and deserve a top 25 spot. Tulsa is no pushover here, and they're going to surprise a lot of people. They are very good against the run, and what does Cincinnati do so well? Having a dual threat quarterback that knows when to run the football. So if they're able to make that quarterback uncomfortable, if they're able to limit him to at least fewer yards than he's been averaging, we might see a Cincinnati loss here. But I'll give you my thoughts on who wins in just a second. Justin, I'll go to you. Tulsa versus Cincinnati, who wins this game? And does this mean if Cincinnati wins that they are going to be a lock in the college football playoff?
Well, look, Zaire Smith for Tulsa, quarterback for Tulsa, he's played a hell of a year. He is definitely controlled that offense, and he's the reason why they're in the championship game, because he's just controlled the offense in and out and got them in the right sets. And so I have to give props to Smith for that, definitely. But here's the thing. Cincinnati has just dominated all year. It's not been like dominating wins by the scoreboard, but just in how they play, how hard they play, and how tough they play. They seem to play better than every team they've played this year. Obviously, that's why they're undefeated. And so I am going to go with Cincinnati. I'm going to go with Cincinnati 28-14. Cincinnati's going to win. And even with this win, I just don't see how Cincinnati gets into the college football playoffs.
Seth?
Yeah, I'm with Justin on just about everything. I think Cincinnati will win the game. I think Tulsa's a good team, and I think they've done a great job this year. But I think Cincinnati is just going to be too much for them. And with that, I don't have much hope for the Cincinnati team to get into the playoffs this year.
Yeah, in order for Cincinnati to really sneak in, a lot of things have to fall into place. And we're going to talk about a couple of different scenarios that might happen in just a second. My personal opinion is if Cincinnati wins this game convincingly, they've made a very strong argument to get into the college football playoffs. They will have defeated several. So Cincinnati can handle Tulsa big. I'm saying 3-4 touchdowns. I think that turns a lot of eyes over to Cincinnati that they might eke in there. But like I said, a lot of things have to fall into place. Listen, I'm going to go Cincinnati here in the win. They have 11 returning starters, all very highly recruited. And they seem to have just stuck together like a family. And I think at the end of the day, the best team wins, not necessarily the best players. We've seen a lot of great players go down in big games because their team can't get it done. I like Cincinnati as a whole unit. I think Tulsa is going to make life very difficult in the first couple quarters. But eventually, I think Cincinnati just finds a way to win like they have done all year. I'm going Cincinnati here in a 28-24 victory, another very close game today. The good thing about these college football games this year is I think we're going to have a lot of good matchups today. Moving on to the game of the day, number 1 Alabama versus number 7 Florida. Now, perhaps besides Clemson, the most high-powered offenses in the entire college football this year, you have Florida and Alabama. Trask is putting up numbers that will blow people's minds, breaking records, leader for the Heisman in a lot of people's eyes right now. Here's the deal. Alabama's got some guys too. Mac Jones, Smith, both guys are also up for the Heisman this year. So when it comes to offense, these two teams are not short of scoring points, and these two teams are going to they're going to put up points and yards no matter what happens today. So the bad thing is both teams' defenses have struggled mightily. Florida's more so than Alabama's, absolutely. Florida's defense last week lost them the game against LSU with dumb penalties, bad pass interferences, and then, of course, we saw the famous shoe chucking across the field that inevitably led to a nice LSU touchdown towards the end of the football game. So Florida can't really stop anybody. They've gotten yards put up on them every single game, almost averaging 350-plus yards have gone against Florida. The difference maker has been that they've been able to put up so many points that even if they're up by 2-3 touchdowns, so it doesn't matter. Now, Alabama's offense is the exact same way. They dismantle teams with their offense. They've got a running back in Najee Harris that is a monster. They've got a wide receiver in Smith that most people think, and we've talked about this several times, is going to be a probably first-round pick to some team. He is that good. Mac Jones, even though I'm not completely sold on Mac Jones being a great NFL quarterback, he's a great college quarterback because he's in the right system. He reminds me a lot of an A.J. McCarron, somebody that is phenomenal in college because he's in the right system, because he's got great coaches around him, and I like Mac Jones in that situation. That being said, I think these teams struggle mightily on defense. The numbers show that they both struggle mightily on defense. They give up a lot of yards. It is going to be which team can get the most stops, and that is the big difference here. I trust in Alabama just a little bit more when it comes to that. I like Florida's defense because they're tenacious. They get after it, but at the end of the day, if you're not stopping teams from getting into the end zone, I don't care how aggressive you are. I think Alabama just gets 1 or 2 more stops. This is going to be a close game. I say within 7 to 10 points, but I'm going to go Alabama 34, Florida 27. I just think Bama gets 1 extra stop here today, and that is the big difference in the whole football game. But don't count Florida out because, like I said, this offense reminds me a lot of Kansas City. They can score in under 1 minute and 20 seconds. With that tight end, with that quarterback, Florida's offense is scary, but Alabama gets 1 extra stop today, which is the difference in the football game. Seth, I'm going to go to you, the big SEC guy. What do you have going on in this matchup, and is there a chance that Florida has the possibility of knocking Alabama off?
Okay, so a couple of weeks ago, I would have said this is going to be one of the best games of the year, and it's going to be a nail biter to the end. But after the last couple of weeks, Alabama's defense, in my opinion, has beyond stepped up, and I think Florida's defense hasn't done anything to change all year.
Besides losing.
And then Smith seems to just be getting better and better. each week as we go. It's ridiculous. I am kind of feeling a massive point spread here.
Oh,
I
okay.
think Alabama is really going to put it on them. First off, it's never a good idea to talk smack to Alabama before a game. I mean, I don't know why people keep doing it, but they do. And so Dan Mullen's already over here saying they're going to win, and it's already a wrap. They'll talk about the playoffs after the game. He might regret that. I don't know. It's a Nick Saban coach team. It's going to be hard to beat no matter who it is. But
Yep.
I've got Alabama winning. I just think they're going to be ready, and I think they're going to double team Kyle Pitts. It's just going to.
I think
Gotta
your
shut
mic's
him down.
going out.
I think they're going to double team Kyle Pitts the whole game. I think they're just going to do their best to shut him down, and with him, I think the offense kind of flows. So
Yeah.
I think Alabama takes this one.
Well, I think that's very similar, like I said, to Kansas City. When you have a tight end like Kelsey, a lot of the offense flows through Travis Kelsey and flows through Pitts. They get a couple touches. Next thing you know, now you're one-on-one on the outsides because they've got to stop that middle attack, and that is what opens up this offense. Like you said, I don't understand why people continually trash talk teams like Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson. Like, you understand that's just more fuel to the fire that you don't need to add. So, like I said, this is one of those weird games for me where I think Alabama is by far the better team all around, but Florida just seems to show up in weird times this year. We've seen them step up in games where I thought they were going to lose, where they pull it off. And I just don't know with Florida what you're going to get from week to week. But I can very well see an Alabama blowout, in all honesty. I want to keep it close just because I think the football fan in me wants this to be one of the best games all year. Like you've said, I want to see Mac Jones and Trask just dueling it out until the final minutes of the football game. But like you said, I can fully see an Alabama blowout. Justin, what do you think on this game?
Well, so earlier in the year, I picked Florida to win the national title.
Yeah.
And obviously with the 2 losses, that isn't helping my case right now. But honestly, I thought Florida played extremely well last week versus LSU. I thought they played very sound. And of course, they were missing Kyle Pitts. He was out. He's the guy. As much as Tony is a very good wide receiver for Florida, the senior Tony, he's a very good wide receiver. Look, we all know Kyle Pitts is the key to the Florida offense. And he will command some double teams this week versus Alabama. Definitely, because he's healthy. He's gonna be coming back. He's gonna be fresh. So he's gonna be ready to go. And of course, I love Kyle Trask, my boy Kyle Trask. He's definitely on another level. He's an animal. And I believe he's going to be the Heisman Trophy winner at the end of the year, without a doubt. He has to, in my opinion, there's no other person that could even be close to him winning the Heisman. But you also got to look on the other side: Alabama, Mac Jones, Najee Harris, Devontae Smith. They've all played incredible. Even when Jalen Waddle went out, Alabama seemed to never break a stride, and they've continued to just roll over opponent. Now, the caveat to that is the opponents that they've been playing have not been as good as Florida. Okay, they haven't played a team as good as Florida yet. I know the SEC is hard. But Alabama has not played a Florida team yet, other than Texas A&M. They played Texas A&M, but let's be honest, they've beaten Ole Miss. Come on, Arkansas. Those teams are nowhere near the level of Florida. They have nowhere near the players of Florida, and so I think it's going to be a close game. But if I want to ride with my national championship pick, I have to pick this. Florida to knock off Alabama and get in to the college football playoffs. I'm saying it. Alabama goes down tonight, 35-31, Florida.
Folks, just so you know, it's very early in the morning when this thing gets filmed too. So that's right. He is drinking at around 8 in the morning. Okay, so just throwing that one out there. Now, I would agree with you and also disagree with you at the same time. I don't think Alabama has played an offense like Florida all year, but they have definitely played several defenses like Florida all year. And here's the perfect mixture, in my opinion: Georgia's defense, Florida's offense. Put those two together. That is your SEC champion, because that is an Alabama type of guy, right? A defense that can stop the run. Georgia's defense has been phenomenal. The problem is they don't have an offense that can put up points. And in the Bama Georgia game, what we saw was a Georgia defense that simply just got worn down from playing almost 32 minutes on the field the entire game. Their defense got no break because their offense was not there. I mean, Georgia was one of those teams that has had a mess on the offensive side of the football. We saw the young quarterback transfer out earlier this year as well. They have a walk-on starting. They've gone back and forth. If you, and Seth, let me know if you agree with this. If you had Florida's offense and Georgia's defense, I think that's the recipe for beating an Alabama. Someone that can stuff a run, but also put up 48 points if they really need to. And that is where I think Florida's going to struggle here. I don't know that they can. We've not seen, at least this year, that Florida can stop a run and slow down an offense. If that's the case, Florida's got a real strong chance here of taking this football game. But that is why I just don't think Florida can pull this one off. Seth, do you agree with that?
I do. I don't understand why Georgia waited so long to start the transfer quarterback from USC. Their offense has been different in every aspect since the day they started him. I think if that Georgia-Florida game happens right now with the way Georgia's playing, I think Georgia walks away with it. I think Georgia is the better team as of right now.
I think this is for Alabama. I'm not saying that they would beat Alabama, but I'm saying it would be a very, very good game if it was Georgia and Alabama now, as opposed to when they played earlier in the year.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, for all we know, Georgia might be undefeated right now if they had started him. They might be the number one team. I mean, Georgia, they messed themselves up by doing the quarterback system, but they figured it out. They'll go to a good bowl game and they'll be ready for next year. But I do agree, Georgia's defense with Florida's offense put together, that's the team that beats Alabama.
Well, especially Georgia's defense might be one of the best we've ever seen in college football when you look at the numbers. Now, I know a lot of people, I'm an analytics guy. I like to look at the numbers. What does it say on paper? Georgia's defense is allowing some of the fewest rushing yards in almost all of college football history. I mean, they literally have had games where they have held teams to 60 rushing yards this year. I don't care if that's a Division III school or if that's a Division I school. If you hold a team to under 64 yards with the amount of attempts teams get this year, that's pretty darn impressive. Georgia's defense, their offense, what I've seen from Georgia lately, Georgia could have been the team to sit up top the SEC. And I think, honestly, the way they are built and so well-rounded now, I think they would have beaten Alabama. I think they would have beaten Florida, and I think they would be my favorite to win the championship this year with how well-rounded they have been playing recently. But the sad part is you only get what you get on paper. You got to play with what you have. You got to play with the situations that you have, and they clearly messed up in the quarterback position early. Way too many in and outs. We changed quarterbacks, I think, twice or three different times in the Alabama game. From the walk-on to the incoming freshman back to the walk-on. So when you have no clarity at the offensive side and especially the quarterback position, you're in deep, deep trouble. Justin, any final thoughts before we go on to the playoff talk?
Look, I agree. Georgia has the best defense in all college football. But if you go look back at that Alabama game, Georgia was missing two key players on their defense when they played them. Now, I'm not saying Georgia would have won or anything. It probably still would have ended up the same. But Georgia was missing two key players when they played Alabama. They were missing their linebacker, their starting middle linebacker, and they were missing a corner. All right, their third corner, their nickel back corner. So look, those are some big. I'm not saying it probably still would have been the same. But who knows if those guys would have been there, but in the game, if it would have been any different with that. Also, what I would like to point out is a lot of people think Florida's run defense is terrible. I would like to say, let's look at the numbers. The numbers don't show that they're definitely middle of the pack in run defense, but I would say their biggest weakness is the safeties. Their safeties are the biggest weakness of their team. I actually think they're pretty decent at run game. If you look at the numbers show that they're not the best, they're not the worst. They're a little middle of the pack. But I think their run defense is not as bad as everybody thinks it is. I would say it's going to come down to the safeties. Can the safeties go and make plays? Can they like stop the big plays from Devontae Smith? Can they keep Devontae Smith in front and not behind him? That's going to be a key factor in the game. So I would tell everybody look out for the safeties. That's going to be who wins the ball game. Which safeties can control who they keep in front of them, and who they let behind them. Because Tony and Devontae Smith and Kyle Pitts, they're going to be running. So you got to keep them in front. You can't let them get behind you. And so that's what's going to come down to.
So a couple of quick points, and then we'll move on. I don't think that having those two players added to Georgia's defense would have changed the game, because the name of the game wasn't, can we stop them on defense? Because we saw that several times, especially early. The name of the game was, can Georgia put a ball into the end zone without turning the ball over or going out in third and outs every single time? We saw the I don't know the name of the transfer of the walk-on quarterback, but we saw him miss some major wide open throws in that football game. If they have good quarterback play, I think that's a very good game. And like Seth said, if they started the USC transfer at the beginning of the year, Georgia might be undefeated right now and could be the best team in all of college football. And then next thing I'll point out to you, we know that Florida safeties struggle, and the problem is they can't cover anybody behind them. They give up way too much cushion. They're 7 and 8 yards deep in the zone press defense that they play. We know they can't cover anybody, but we do know that they can throw a hell of a shoe, as we saw last week against LSU, putting LSU in the game-winning position. And then when you say middle of the road in the run game, the problem is in the SEC, if you're middle of the road in run game, you're a bad running defensive team, because the SEC has some major running backs, man. And that is why this is going to be an interesting game. But let's go ahead with that topic. We're going to move into the playoff talks, because there's a lot of different situations that could be happening today. Seth, you and I have talked several times about the different possibilities. If this team wins, what happens? Is there a possibility that a team that doesn't win a conference championship makes it in? What I would say for 2020 is, who the hell knows? We don't know what's going to happen. This has been chaotic all year. We all know, from the beginning of college football to the end, from the NBA to the NFL, this has been one of the most unpredictable years in recent history when it comes to football. Now, what I want to say is this. I have Alabama winning and in the championship, or winning the championship today and in the playoffs. I have Clemson winning the championship today and in the playoffs. I have Ohio State winning their championship and in the playoffs. And I have Notre Dame in a very close match, losing the championship, but beating Clemson earlier in the year and still having a great record and getting into the playoffs. Those are the 4 teams I think will make it today. Now, that being said, there's a lot of different possibilities. And I'll go to you and Seth and Justin in just a second. Coastal Carolina is not playing a championship game due to COVID. I'm very heartbroken for that team. That team deserves, in my opinion, most of you don't think so, when it comes to the college football, and I read this several times, it is who deserves to be in the playoffs the most. It's a mixture of record, it's a mixture of strength of opponents, and it's a mixture of win percentages. And Coastal Carolina has a lot of top-ranked team wins this year. I don't care if it's against a Louisiana team. If Louisiana's ranked, that still counts. They have one of the highest winning percentages besides Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson this year. So they're still in that top tier, right, of winning percentages in games. Coastal Carolina has a championship, and they win that. It's against another ranked opponent. Coastal Carolina, in my opinion, deserves to be in the college football playoffs. So let's start there to start off. Seth, would you agree, based on, and this is, like I said, based on what college football has written down in the rule book as to how they pick champions, right? We saw the same problem with UCF. When UCF went 12-0 and they played 2 ranked opponents, they said it was strength of schedule. And that one I could argue for or against. I thought they had very good win margins. So really what they're weighing is strength of schedule. Have they beaten X amount of ranked opponents, and UCF just had one too many non-ranked opponent wins, even though they were massive wins. So I can understand the UCF one. But Coastal Carolina will have had 4 wins over ranked opponents. If they would have played this game, this would have been their 5th win against a ranked opponent this year. Their win percentages are at just as high as Bama, Clemson, and Ohio State, I don't care if it's a different division. They are producing and playing that they deserve to be in the playoff. That is what the rule book says. I tend to agree with the rule book because there's a lot of teams that they could have the greatest year of their lives. They could beat 22 ranked opponents, but if their names aren't Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, they don't get in. I don't think that's fair. I think it's good for college football to get some of these teams that play gives them a chance to get into the playoffs at least, as opposed to an outsider shot that we have seen in recent history. So Seth, I'll go to you. If Coastal Carolina wins or played a championship game and won it, do you believe that they had deserved to get in the college football playoffs?
Sure. I think they on paper, if you take their name value out of it and you take their conference value out of it,
Plug
you
in
put everything down
for Coastal Carolina, I think they're in.
Yeah, I think Coastal Carolina has done everything correct. I mean, what more can you ask? They've won every game. It's not their fault that the opponents they played were not top 25 teams. I mean, they played the schedule that was there and they won. I mean, they've done what they're supposed to. However, in the college football committee, even though it's not written, I think there's an underlined criteria to get in. And when they say conference championships, I think there's just a little bitty invisible line saying Power 5 conference champion, because I don't see a non-Power 5 team getting in until they expand the playoffs.
Yes. And that is why we have argued so much this year. The playoffs have got to be expanded because the problems is these smaller conferences are suffering because they have that stronghold of you're not a Power 5 team, therefore nobody has a name face value to you. Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, these teams are going to bring in millions and millions and millions of views. But what they don't understand is the Coastal Carolina game, when they came back in the final fourth quarter, was the third highest viewed college football game of the year. Why? People like underdog stories. People like the little guy coming out there. They like Coastal Carolina, first time ever being ranked. Coastal Carolina, first time ever being undefeated. Coastal Carolina, first time ever being in the college football talk. People like that. And until they expand the playoffs and get gutsy enough to allow teams like this to get in, and listen, do I think Coastal Carolina beats anybody that's in this lineup? Probably not. It's just two different animals, right? I mean, they would have to have a near perfect game to ever beat an Alabama, a Florida, a Clemson, Ohio State, Notre Dame. We can all agree on that. But at the end of the day, they deserve to be there. And that's why we've got to expand this playoffs, because teams like Coastal Carolina and UCF are always going to be screwed over if this doesn't get expanded. Justin, what are your thoughts on it?
So, yeah, Coastal Carolina, they, of course, are undefeated. But it's all who you play. And I've said this for years, and I'll keep saying it. It's just who you play. Like, it doesn't matter if you're undefeated. You have to play, high quality opponents, and you have to win. And some of the opponents they played this year, they have been close games, and those teams, some of those teams haven't been ranked. So that also hurts them. I will agree that, they had a hell of a year. They have just done fantastic. For me, there's no way I could see them in the playoffs, just because of the opponents they played. There's the teams in front of them have played a lot harder opponents and have a lot better, and have maybe not better records, but they definitely have played more high quality opponents. And so that's something that hurts them. And it's just who you play.
Well, the problem is too, for a lot of these smaller schools, is these bigger schools have their schedules basically 80 to 95% made up in the next 2 to 3 years. I know for a fact Oregon does, because I've seen the 2021 schedule. I've seen the 2022 tentative schedules for Oregon. Now, we have open spaces for big games. And this is where I think Oregon is brilliant, in the sense that if we want to be in college football talks, if we want to be get big ranked 5-star guys, Oregon is adding SEC and Big 10 and Big 12 teams every single year now. We were supposed to play Ohio State at the beginning of this year, right? So Oregon is doing the smart thing, which is we've got to start getting bigger guys because we want to be in the college football talk. But some of these smaller guys, and Oregon is not a small guy, right? At this point, they have enough credit to where they can call up in Alabama if they really wanted to. No, I don't want Alabama, but we can call up in Alabama and say, hey, let's play in 2023. And I can guarantee you that contract is signed. Coastal Carolina doesn't have that power. And when their school, when they ride into an Alabama, they're going to go, hey, we'd like to play Alabama. Alabama's going to laugh and go, who's Coastal Carolina, right? So that's the big problem too, is a lot of these schedules are already made up and they don't have the power to change that. So they're not given an opportunity to show themselves against higher competition. The only way we can see that happen is by expanding the playoffs. Give them a spot as the 8th seed, as the 9th seed, whatever it is. And then, then we can say, hey, listen, they weren't up to the competition, or we can say, hey, they played a hell of a game against Bama. They just ended up losing by a touchdown or so. And that's the only way we're going to find out, because schedule making can't be the reason that we don't see these games happen, because it's more so about the money than it is about the opponent. That's just plain and simple. Coming from somebody who played in college, our college, we played Division I opponents for simple fact that the Division I opponent was going to pay us a big old check if we went there and got our butts kicked. And there's very few opportunities. There's so many teams that can call up in Alabama and say, hey, we want to play you for X amount of dollars. And who's Alabama going to take? Coastal Carolina, who has had no record of ever being this good, or a Duke, who used to be decent back in the 70s and 80s, teams like that. So any last comments on Coastal Carolina, guys? All right, well, let's move on to Cincinnati then. Another interesting thing. Let's say Cincinnati wins today. They go undefeated. I think it would be 9-0 or 10-0. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's 9-0, right? If Cincinnati wins today.
Yeah.
I want to say I think it's 9-0. I think they're 8-0 right now, if I'm not mistaken.
It's gonna be 9-0.
9-0. So if Cincinnati goes 9-0, they also have about the same record as Coastal Carolina. They will have played at least 4 ranked opponents. Tulsa, who's coming off a very big year. This was a surprising rank for the championship game. No one expected Tulsa to slide into the top 25. So if they beat a ranked opponent in the championship, is this a way that we see Cincinnati slide into a college football playoff? Or is it the same thing that we're saying about Coastal Carolina? Basically they're not a Power 5 team. Therefore they don't, the college football committee probably won't put them in. Seth, I'll go to you, and then Justin, I'll go back to you. Is there a way Cincinnati can squeeze into this playoffs, or are they completely out as well?
I just don't see it. I just don't see it. I think as it stands, I think a one-loss A&M, who I think has a horrible chance of getting in, still stands a better chance of getting in than an undefeated conference champion Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati's 6th, 7th, 8th on the poll of getting in. So no, I don't see Cincinnati getting in, even if they won by 60. I don't know. I just can't see it.
Justin?
Again, I'm gonna go back to it's who you play. And their schedule has been a little weak. They haven't played the top teams like the other guys have played. And so I just can't see them. I can't see them having a chance to get in. I can't see that any scenario that they can get in. I think Florida or Texas A&M or those guys would get in way before them. So I don't think there's any way Cincinnati could get in the playoffs.
Well, let me give you a quick scenario as to how I think Cincinnati could get in. So here's how this is going to work. If Bama completely comes out and does what they're supposed to do, if Clemson does what they're supposed to do, if Ohio State does what they're supposed to do, and I believe that at the end of the day, this is going to be an easy Bama, Clemson, Ohio State, and then probably I would say in Notre Dame, based on what Notre Dame's strength of schedule this year and how Notre Dame has played this year, and the fact that they beat the conference champion once. I believe that's my Final Four. I will get to your guys' Final Fours in just a second. I want to give you a scenario though. Bama loses, Clemson loses, Ohio State loses, and of course Notre Dame would be in. Therefore, do you put nothing but conference champions in? Because the problem you have there is you can't go across the board and say you can't not put Florida in because they won the SEC championship, correct? So therefore, Florida's most likely in, unless they argue a 2-loss Florida is out. Florida's most likely in. Northwestern most likely in. Notre Dame most likely in, right? Therefore, do you have to go to an undefeated conference champion after that? Because some of these bigger teams, if you have an argument to put Bama in, then you have to put an argument for Texas A&M, who's also 10-1. You have to put an argument for not Clemson because Clemson would have 2 losses, but you'd have to put an argument for an Ohio State because Ohio State has only lost 1 game. That's where I think this can get really muddy here. And that is where I think a Cincinnati could squeeze in order to not pander to all the 1-loss teams, because at that point it gets too messy, in my opinion. There's way too many 1-loss teams that deserve to fill that last spot. I think that is where a Cincinnati could squeeze in here and really take on that championship level spot and be in the playoffs. Justin, I'll go to you. Do you think that there's a scenario where if some of these top teams go down across the board, they can't continue, they can't put one-loss team over the other, because Texas A&M might deserve to be there. Bama deserves to be there. Ohio State, even though I don't believe because of the amount of games they played, would deserve to be there. That's where it gets really muddy for me. And I don't know that Florida, being a 2-loss champion, still deserves to be there, even if they have beaten Alabama. That's where it gets muddy, because that's where a Cincinnati, in my opinion, could definitely get in, because instead of having to fight 7 teams, they can just say, we're taking undefeated conference champions next. Justin, I'll go to you. Is that a scenario that you think could play out based on how the games play out today?
Yeah, so the committee is going to have its hands full with making if that scenario happens, figuring out who the teams are going to be. Here's my thing though: even if Alabama loses, they're in. Okay, I think everybody can say that. There's no way Alabama can be left out of the playoffs. They are the best team in the nation, and no, there's just no way, even with a loss, that you can lead them out of this playoffs. Personally, I just don't think it's gonna happen.
What happens? I'll throw a scenario at you. What happens with Ohio State then? Because a 1-loss Bama and a 1-loss Ohio State, you would have to basically use the same criteria, which is they both lost in the championship game, but they're both, I would argue that Ohio State deserves to be in the Final Four because they're that good of a team. And so therefore you're not at the quality of the team, or you're going off the quality of the team, which is against what the committee has really talked about. It's more about, are you a conference champion? What's your strength of schedule? How have your winning margins been? So there's where it gets muddy for me, is Ohio State, who would be a 1-loss team who's had good winning margins, would then be held out, and they could have a big argument as to, hey, we're just as good as, we lost just like Alabama did. We deserve to be in. And that's where you have to expand the playoffs, because this is getting crazy. But what scenario do you give to that one where Ohio State might lose 1 game, or Notre Dame? Like, what do you go with that?
Well, look, Alabama has played a lot of a better schedule than Ohio State. Ohio State, to me, they have to win to get in. If they lose, they are out. They've only played 5 games, right? Look, Alabama's played close to 10 games. They've played 5 games, right? And the 5 games have been nobody's except for Indiana. They played Indiana. All right, so look, Ohio State, they have to win to get in. If they don't win, they can't complain that they got cheated out. Why is Alabama in? Because Ohio State has to win this to get in. They're not getting in if they lose. Alabama, if they lose, they are in regardless. Alabama's in the playoffs regardless. All right, they're getting in. And if Notre Dame, I feel like Notre Dame's in regardless too. Win or lose, Notre Dame's in as well. All right, those 2 teams are a lock already for the college football playoffs. Regardless whether they lose, regardless whether they win, those teams will be in the college football playoffs. And now the only thing that will be left to the committee is who will those last 2 spots go to. Will it go to Florida? Will it go to Texas A&M? Or will it go to Clemson? Vice versa, et cetera, et cetera. But those 2 teams are a lock for the playoffs, no matter what happens today in their games, win or lose. Alabama and Notre Dame, both in the playoffs, and then it'll just be up to those 2 spots left who gets in it at that point.
Seth, I'll go to you. I know we've talked a lot here and kind of left you out, but what are your thoughts on all this mess? I know we've had several scenarios that we think could happen, but this could get really muddy really quick based on what happens today. I mean, some of these top teams go down. You're in a big situation where you're going to have a lot of 1-loss teams that deserve to be in the playoffs. At that point, does the committee say, hey, hands off, we can't deal with all that. We can't deal with 6 teams that are one-loss teams that could deserve to be in. Let's just go with the undefeated champions, of Cincinnati or Coastal Carolina or vice versa. I mean, it can get very muddy very quick. So, Seth, what are your thoughts on all this?
I would actually like to see it happen. I would love to see a ridiculous amount of upsets and a bunch of deserving teams that would really force the hand of the committee to make the hard pick of who gets in.
Yeah.
And then a couple of teams get left out, and those teams that get left out just go absolutely crazy over being left out. And all of that leads us to hopefully like an 8-team playoff.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I don't think it's going to happen because that's a lot of upsets. I just don't see that many upsets happening.
I definitely agree there. There's a lot of things that have to happen in order for this to get chaotic. I think the best thing to happen, though, is for this to get chaotic, in my opinion, because that will force the committee's hand, and we've talked about this several times this week, of expanding the playoffs because there's too many teams that deserve to be – we deserve to see a Texas A&M Alabama rematch after the way Texas A&M's been playing. We deserve to see a Cincinnati versus a Coastal Carolina, 2 undefeated teams that have played very good all year. We deserve to see a Clemson Notre Dame game 3. We deserve to see a Florida Notre Dame, whatever it is. We deserve as fans to see that. And the playoffs, I guess, is the biggest thing when we're talking about the playoffs here. Because that is the only thing that is going to fix a lot of these issues. So I am praying for chaos. I hope there's chaos because that will cause the committee to finally open their eyes and understand what they have to do in order to get this going. So my Final Four, I'm going Bama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Notre Dame today. That is my locks for my Final Four. Do I want to see that? No, I'd much rather see a Northwestern in there over Ohio State. That would be very cool to see. But that's what I think is going to be the safest and probably, in my opinion, what happened. Seth, give us your Final Four. Who are your locks to make the college football playoffs?
Yeah, that was my exact Final Four in order. I think it's going to be number 1, Alabama. I think Clemson wins, and they take the number 2 spot. And because of that, it bounces Notre Dame back to 4, putting Ohio State in at 3. Now, I will say, because Texas A&M has one of the toughest schedules in the nation, and they only lost to Alabama at Alabama. Yeah. So if Notre Dame loses to Clemson by a incredible margin, I could understand them putting A&M in the 4th spot instead of Notre Dame. I don't see that happening. I still think Notre Dame will get that 4th spot, but I'm just saying if it's an absolute blowout, I could see them putting Texas A&M at the 4th spot.
Well, I said that earlier is Notre Dame's got to keep this game close. If Notre Dame gets blown off the face of the earth, that's where, in my opinion, even a Texas A&M, but I go straight towards a Cincinnati team, a team that a lot of people are hyping on. That's where one of those 2 teams is going to slide into that last spot. So Notre Dame's got to be careful here. They've got to keep it within 3 to 7 points. Otherwise, this opens up to a whole array of teams that deserve that 4th spot. My opinion, Cincinnati would deserve it based on what they've performed. I know they won't put Coastal Carolina, but they would deserve it. I think the most likely 2 options would be a Texas A&M, would be a 1-loss Ohio State, or Northwestern, excuse me, or I guess they'd be, a 2-loss Northwestern, I guess, would be at that point, so they would be out. But either if Ohio State would lose, a 1-loss Ohio State, a 1-loss or an undefeated Cincinnati, and a 1-loss Texas A&M would be your 3 teams that you would want to plug into that 4th spot. So Notre Dame's got – this is very important for Notre Dame today. They've got to keep it close. Otherwise, there's an array of teams that could slide into that 4th spot, and it's hard to argue against what those teams are. Justin, your Final Four, I know you've already mentioned Florida is your national champion this year, but who are your Final Four in your order?
All right, so let's give the fans what they want, all right? I'm giving the fans what they want, so let's do it. Alabama, Notre Dame are the top 2 without a doubt right there. Whatever happens, I feel like Notre Dame's going to beat Clemson, all right? Clemson will be out of the Final Four as well. I also have Ohio State out as well of the Final Four. I feel like they will lose today to Northwestern. Both those teams are gone. See you later. Have fun. Trevor Lawrence, you go to the Jets and try to fix that debacle right there, right? Goodbye. So that leaves us 2 spots left who's going to get in at that point. And I think it will be Florida will be that number 3 team because they will have beaten Alabama. I still think Notre Dame would be the number one team. Of course, Alabama, then Florida, the SEC championship, Florida with 2 losses. And then the 4th team, I'm going out on a limb. It will be Oklahoma, who will win the Big 12 championship today. They're sitting at number 7. It will be Oklahoma that will sneak into that last spot. And that will be the final 4. Will be Notre Dame, Alabama, Florida, Oklahoma. And I'm predicting it will be a Florida and Alabama national championship game. Rematch of the SEC championship game. And Florida does it again. Knocks up Alabama for the 2nd time in 1 year. And Kyle Trask not only was the Heisman, and Florida not only is the national champions, but that will cement the Gators another school championship, and they will be back again.
So
No, Oklahoma is 13, right? Iowa State's 7
Iowa State 6.
or 6. Yeah.
Yeah, Oklahoma's back at 13. So apparently Oklahoma winning this game against an Iowa State would jump up majorly today. My problem, I think, more so is the fact that Bama is still ahead of Florida, even though Florida would have just beaten them in the conference championship. So it gets
Bama beat them earlier in the year. So it's be 1-1, and you got to go with these.
They didn't play yet.
yeah, they
Who
have
has the better team?
Alabama and Florida haven't played yet.
They beat Texas A&M, who beat Florida.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of like a chain reaction. Okay. I kind of get where you're going. I think it's a little out there. I'm not gonna lie.
Texas A&M loses today too.
Wow, we're just getting.
It's currently 7-7 in that game.
Guys, you all saw the fact that Justin was drinking some wine earlier in the morning. So I think we all understand he might be a little bit drunk here. So we'll have to address this off the air. Make sure that we get him to some AA meetings. Make sure he stops drinking so early because this is crazy. Seth and I are kind of going dead even across the board. Justin's got number 1. What was it? Notre Dame.
Florida Gators, baby.
All right.
National champions this year.
We've got number 1, Notre Dame, number 2, Alabama, number 3, Florida, and number 4, Oklahoma somehow sneaks in there. Who knows what's going to happen today, but I can guarantee you that might not be the scenario that happens today. Well, hey, here's the deal. Justin is the only one who's gotten, besides myself, and I don't count myself, is the only one who's gotten a perfect pick Saturday the entire college football season. So Seth and I, we've grown up. Well, of course, I've grown up with you. You're my brother, but Seth's grown up with Justin. If there's anybody that some lucky crap is going to happen to, it is going to be Justin. If anybody's ever going to win the Powerball, if anybody's ever going to be struck by lightning, Justin is the kid who, for some reason, gets the luckiest. Seth, you can agree with that because we've seen this kid get lucky one too many times. So I can't completely count you out based on your rabbit's foot that you've got around your neck. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to have a great college football playoffs. I think that today is the day that college football stands still. We get more playoff spots. The fans get what they want. We expand this playoffs so we get to see teams that deserve to be there be in that spot. I don't care if it's Coastal Carolina to Cincinnati to the Ducks next year, whoever it is. If you there, you should get your shot. You should get your opportunity. You shouldn't be held out based on schools that you had to play because the schedules have already been made, or you shouldn't be held out based on how good you have played all year. We can agree with that. Seth can agree. Justin can agree. Today is the day. We want the world to get shook. We want Bama to go down. We want Ohio State to go down. We want Notre Dame to go down. We want chaos because we want more playoff spots. That's what the fan deserves. That's what we deserve because at the end of the day, it is what is most fair to all these teams like Coastal Carolina and Cincinnati that get in and deserve it. And then they get held out because, like Seth said, there's that invisible line where they're not a Power 5 team. Therefore, they don't deserve to get in. So, Justin, Seth, any last words before we get going on this beautiful college football Saturday?
Go Gators.
Go Gators for Justin. Seth, anything?
Nope.
Well, Justin is go Gators, go Sooners, go Fighting Irish, and go Go Roll Tide. So we've got some crazy picks here. Hey, make sure you're playing along on Instagram, guys. It's been so much fun. We've had a couple people very close to perfect pickers this year. We've only had 2, not including myself. Justin is the other person that has gotten perfect picks this year. College football has been crazy. We're going to do a vote also on the college football picks on Instagram today, the Locker Room Podcast 615, on how many playoff spots should be expanded after today. So we're going to do that vote as well. So if you want to be involved, go to my social media. Make sure you're voting. Hey, this is going to be a great college football Saturday. Congrats to the Ducks on 2-time champions. I've got something in the works when it comes to Oregon. So if you are interested to see what I've got coming up, make sure you're listening to the podcast on Tuesdays. I've got some big stuff coming up. We're approaching, we're doubling our views every time. And it is because of you guys, the Locker Room faithful. I call you that every time because you have stuck with me from when I sucked at the beginning to when I still suck now. You're still there. And I love you guys. I appreciate everybody listening. I appreciate Justin and Seth getting up very early on a Saturday. It's not easy. When we're playing Call of Duty till 5 a.m, you can't expect to get up and work at 8. But we do it for the love of the game, love of the podcast, because they're my brothers. I love you guys. Appreciate you coming on. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. I know it's a little bit longer one today, but hey, this has been fun. Justin, Seth, thanks for being with me. Make sure you guys are playing along at the Locker Room Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I will tag both of them in all of my social media. So give them some love. You follow them. Follow what they do. If you want to hear some more crazy stories, go to Justin's Instagram. I'm sure you'll find him there. He's got, I'm sure he's got the Phoenix Suns winning the NBA championship this upcoming season. So you never know what you're going to find when it comes to this. It's been a great year, gentlemen. We are going to reconvene when the college football playoffs start. So make sure you're following us. And if you like the show, we're going to do a big college football prediction as it plays out. And we're going to talk about the championship game and everything. And we got a couple other special college football things coming up. So everybody, thanks for joining us today. The Locker Room is for you guys, the fans. If you like us, give us some love in the DMs. Give us some love on the social media. Give these guys some love for joining us today. Have a great day, gentlemen. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
Thanks, man.
We here at the Locker Room thank you for joining us on this Saturday morning pick'em. If you would like to know how to play along at home, it is simple. You will now see a slide with all of my social media. Follow me on Instagram every Saturday morning and you can vote. At the end of the college football season, I will pick a winner for a cash prize for whoever gets the most right answers. So make sure you follow my social media. That is the only way to lock in your answer. You must follow and then join along and play.